Welcome back, everyone. My name is Stephen Rafis, and I am joined by my co-host, Steamer Class. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Syracuse men's head lacrosse coach Gary Gait to the podcast. Regarded as the greatest lacrosse player of all time, Coach Gait has found success at every level. As a player at Syracuse, he was a three-time national champion, two-time player of the year, and was named the most outstanding player of the national championship game in 1990. Coach Gait led Syracuse during their most dominant stretch in program history, losing just one game in his final 3 seasons at Syracuse from 1988 to 1990. Professionally, Coach Gait was a three-time NLL champion, three-time MLL champion, has won 3 Mann Cups, and also won a World Championship with Team Canada in 2006. As a coach, Coach Gait won 7 national championships as an assistant coach for the Maryland women's lacrosse team, and has spent time as a coach in both the MLL and NLL, as well as with Team Canada internationally. Coach Gait took over the Syracuse women's lacrosse program in 2007 and led them for 14 straight seasons. During his time, Syracuse advanced to the national championship game 3 times, and every class to play for Coach Gait reached at least one Final Four during their career. Coach Gait currently enters his 4th season with the Syracuse men's lacrosse program, where he was named the 5th head coach in the program's history in the summer of 2021. Coach Gait, welcome to the podcast.
Wow. Okay. Been around a long time. Going way
Yes, you
back.
have.
Going
Well,
way back.
we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Deemer and I were lucky enough to get the chance to have dinner with you and Dan Nathan at Fort Charles back this summer. Heard a lot of cool stuff. So when we started this podcast, we knew that we definitely wanted to get you on.
Oh, great. Yeah. That was a great meal, nice restaurant, great company. It was fun.
Gary, one thing I've always thought about, and I have a funny story to go along with it too, but I don't
Okay.
know if you remember back in the day, 2003,
Oh my God.
my 10th birthday, Jay Pivick and Daryl Pivick, I believe, set up the opportunity for you to come and hang with all my boys for my birthday party.
I honestly do remember that. I'll be honest, I didn't put it together that that's you, Deaver Class right there. I totally forgot who it was for, but it was fun. And, the Piveks did so much for professional lacrosse and club lacrosse that I was always happy to do anything they asked. And hopefully, you enjoyed the experience. I know I had fun there. I do recall it. And it was good.
Yeah, no, it was a blast, and I mean, we had the fiddlesticks all out in the backyard. We were playing, and I mean, I still have like Team Toyota jerseys, STX gloves. Like I wore that Gate helmet you gave me for, a long time. I'll whip out these pictures for you at some point.
Okay.
But my funny story to go along with that is, because we hadn't, I don't think ever met since then, but at one of the US lacrosse conventions, like those January things, I
Yep.
remember seeing who I thought was you at the time. And I went right up and I go, "Hey, like Coach Gate, like just wanted to say hi. Like, you did my 10th birthday party years ago, all this stuff." And it was just met with a blank stare. And Paul just goes, "I think that was my brother Gary," and I go, "Oh, shit. I really botched that one up."
That's happened a lot of times. No worries. You wouldn't be the first. That's for sure.
Oh,
That
man, like, good times.
That's
Yeah.
unreal. That's great. All right, well, we want to start this off. Obviously, read a really lengthy bio of both your playing career and coaching career. As we said, you're widely regarded as the greatest lacrosse player of all time. And I want to just go back to kind of your childhood, high school, growing up, Victoria Island in British Columbia. What was that like? Where did you really learn the game? Where did you and Paul kind of hone in your skills? If you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
My brother and I, identical twins, down the street, 3 houses. 3 weeks after us were born another set of identical twins. And we grew up together, terrorizing the neighborhood. And at about 3, the neighbors' parents, the twins, started playing lacrosse in an effort. Their dad started coaching and started a lacrosse team to try and tire them out a little bit, take away some of that energy so they could some rest at night. And when they did it and they had success at it, they talked my parents into letting us play. So at age 4, we joined them in a Canadian Tyke league, and we filled pretty much the whole left side right away, 4 lefties and, 2 sets of identical twins, and we grew up playing lacrosse and pretty much until I retired playing, and, that's how I got started. It was just in an effort to, burn some energy and give us something to do so that we wouldn't, terrorize the neighborhood. We were coached by, from that age by, you know, my dad and then, uh, the other set of twins' dad. They were coaches who had never played the game before. So they kind of found whatever they could and did the best job possible. And they coached myself, my brother, and all of us till we were about 10 years old. Um, and that was, I'll be honest, from 4 till probably 11, I was an average player. I was just, you think, well, you're so young, it's not a big deal. But, that was 6, 7 years of playing where I didn't really care. They roll a ball in the corner and say, ground ball drill. You go after the ball. You don't even think about it. You just do whatever. You kind of go through the drills without any purpose. And, you don't really improve that way. So, I was just kind of okay. But I think because we were all so competitive, I know in my neighborhood, it was always myself and Greg Pepper, one twin, versus my brother and Grant Pepper, the other one. So from the day we were born, we had 2-on-2 in anything you could do, So we always had that competition set up. And we got to see, my brother and I were the type of twins that got along, but were competitive. And the other set of twins were combative and couldn't get along and were extremely competitive. So it was nice to see the difference and kind of growing up decide how I wanted to be. And Paul and I decided we want to get along. We don't want to be fighting all the time, but we still want to compete, but let's help each other get better. And that was sort of, what we took out of that relationship. And, but together, the 4 of us put together ended up playing on a team that did pretty well. And we went to the provincial championships at like 9, 10 years old, just like in hockey. They had championships at a really young age. So we didn't win it, but we got there. And I think that's when our parents decided it was time to get a real coach, somebody that played the game, somebody that knew what they were doing to help us. We got to a provincial championship, didn't win it, but really with 2 dads that really hadn't ever played before. So they said, I think these guys might have something. Let's get some coaches in here. So my dad went out and they convinced a gentleman by the name of Ron McNeil, Hall of Fame Canadian player, to take over and coach a bunch of 11, 12-year-olds. And that to me was the tipping point when I got a coach that actually started coaching me differently. And, there were no camps, there were no clinics back then for me. You practiced on your own, you figured it out. But what this coach did differently that I think set me up is he explained why you did a drill and how to win the drill. So to go back to a ground ball drill, he would explain that I'm going to roll the ball in. You're not necessarily going to go run for the ball. You're going to go try and step in front of your opponent before you get to the ball so that he can't get at it, and then you can pick it up easily. So something as simple as that was a bit of a game changer for me because it started me thinking about why and how you do things in games and why people have success. And I kind of took it all in, and he really taught me to go watch the game of lacrosse, watch how people play. They could be on your own team. They could be on the opposite team. They could be adults. They could be whatever. But if you see something done well, go out and try and replicate it. And that's what I did. I became a mimic of every great play I ever saw, every great stick work, dodge, defense, whatever it was. I'd go out in my backyard, and I was very lucky at the time. We had a schoolyard in our backyard that had a wall, perfect for wall ball, fields, so we could practice all the different sports. That really allowed for, the perfect setup to develop those skills. And I've said it a hundred times that, I pretty much could do, by the time I was 12, I had all the stick work skills that I had in my peak in college and professional. I just worked on, and I could do it, replicate anything that pretty much anybody did. And I really enjoyed the finesse of the game, and I really focused on that. And that was something that, made it fun for me. Just don't learn to shoot, but learn how to be deceptive, learn how to fake, learn how to be tricky, learn how to be a little fancy, have some fun with it. And, and that's really how I developed my skills and learned the game, is just evaluating what I saw, going out, working on it. I was lucky. I had a brother. I could go out and I could test it on him and say, "What do you think?" And we'd work on it together, and we'd both improve. And, really kind of our secret to our success right there.
When you were playing at this time, were you playing only box or were you playing any field at all?
Just box. So, there was no field. I can tell you a quick story on the field in Canada. Um, Realistically, there was no field in Canada until 1979. And the reason for that is, in 1978, they put together a Canadian national team that actually won the World Field Championships, playing with wooden box sticks and things like that. But they got drubbed by the US in the round robin, and they came out and won in overtime in Manchester, England in 1978, and shocked themselves that they won a field lacrosse championship without ever playing any field. And from there was some funding and an effort to bring field lacrosse back to Canada. In the 30s, it kind of faded away, and the game moved to box because it was more exciting, and you had the hockey rink, so they played it in the summer, and field kind of died off. And then it was brought back in 79. So, being a 12-year-old, my dad again got involved and became president of the organization that started. It was a field lacrosse club, and it went from 10 years old all the way through adult, and it was called the Victoria Sea Spray at the time. And the current owner of the Victoria Shamrocks was the sponsor of it. He's been involved in lacrosse a long time, and it was, I started out as ball boy for the men's team, playing on the 12 and under team, and had a great blast with it, great time with it. And really that was a key opportunity that happened for myself and my brother, because we were playing box. Everything was great. When we were 12, we went on and we won our first Canadian championship under the coaching of Ron McNeil, to start off a run. I don't think that's ever been equal in Canada, and that's to go out and have one team win every single Canadian championship there is, from Pee Wee through senior lacrosse, and do it in field lacrosse as well. So and I really equate a lot of that to the teachings of Ron McNeil and what he was able to do. Not only did he teach how to learn the game and play the game, but he was really forward thinking in how he approached it. And he was teaching us at 12 in the 70s how to meditate, how to visualize, modern sports psychology. But I can guarantee you there was no other 12-year-old team probably in North America that was learning meditation, visualization, new training techniques. We were doing interval trainings and conditioning, and really, that's all accepted nowadays, even at that age. But back then it was kind of unheard of. So he really provided that opportunity. And along with that, he he took a different approach to how the game should be played. And there was rules set in place for youth lacrosse, and he thought they were kind of silly. So he exposed a lot of them by just doing things different that were allowed within the rules, but made them change. For example, there was no shot clock at the youth level. So I remember one game he made a statement. We held the ball for the entire game and won like 1-0 or something like that. And sure enough, the shot clock came into play the next year. Like many of the things that I've done, I've seen happen before at a young age when I was a kid. So to take those chances, try and create change in a game to help make it better and help grow the game, I think has always been a part of me from a young age, thanks to him. Absolutely.
Gary, I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about, at 12 years old, you kind of take that next step towards, okay, Ron's teaching you, the why behind the drill, how to win the drill, which I think is really interesting. But then even for you to be receptive to the meditation and the mindfulness, I think nowadays can sometimes be hard to get kids at 12 years old to buy into everything, right? So do you think you buying into that was just your competitiveness, or you and your brother just, was it you were gravitating towards lacrosse, or is it just every sport you just had this inner desire to be the best you could be? Like what would you attribute that to?
I think it's kind of a combination, you start doing what he says, and all of a sudden you develop as a player, which I did, and I could do all these different plays and moves and became a much better player. So why wouldn't you do it? Like, and that really, and I say it all the time. I always talk with Paul. I go, I don't understand. Like, I'll do anything that's going to help me have success and win. Like, if it gives me an edge, I'm going to do it because I want to win that bad. And I got that drive to be successful. And that's not in everybody's DNA. I can tell you that. Some people will take something that's an advantage and just do it the way they're used to doing it because that's how they like to do it. You know, even getting into the manufacturing of equipment, the whole idea of making lacrosse equipment. At 10 years old, I learned how to string sticks and do the catguts. We used wood. I learned how to carve and steam, and I made sure my stick gave me an advantage, like that it was balanced, that it was shaped properly, so that I had the tools to have more success than the guy beside me that picked up an old wooden stick that maybe off the balance wasn't very good, it was super heavy, it was too thick, whatever it was. They didn't bother, but I wanted the advantage. So I carved the stick, I restrung it, I put new sidewalls in, I did whatever it took to help that, tool be the best, to provide me the best opportunity to have success. And my brother and I have taken that into every product we've ever made. And we've been doing it since we were 10, and we were fortunate in our careers to be able to still be doing it since we were 10 till today. So we definitely always trying to find that edge, whether it's in equipment or the game or playing. I think you'll see that throughout my career where I'm challenging the rules, the equipment, everything to try and get that edge.
Yeah, I think when you take a look at your coaching career, you took over the Syracuse women's lacrosse program. You were the head coach there for 14 years. If you take a look at kind of what you did there, I think you really pushed the game forward from a rules perspective, from the way that teams played offense, and also just from a stick technology perspective, right? I think you strung the pockets a little bit differently. The introduction to the draw stick, both you and your brother doing that. Is that where all of that comes from? Just from getting that competitive advantage, that competitive edge?
Absolutely. It was always important to understand the rule book. Just like when I was, 10, 11, and Coach McNeil wanted us to hold the ball because, there was no shot clock in the game, and it was in every other level, but needed to be at the younger. So he pushed the envelope. He knew the rule book didn't have that in there. So he attacked it and got the change that is needed because it's still being used today, the shot clock. So um, I always took that approach. On the women's side, I had a long career of you know watching the rules change, being involved in the rules change, and seeing the results of the rules changes over the years. When I started coaching with the women, there was no boundaries, no restraining lines. There was just two 8 and 12 meters and goals at each end. You threw the ball, whoever was closest to it when the ref felt like blowing the whistle, got it when it went out of bounds because there was no out of bounds. Um, then I brought in the first 12-person defense, the first 12-person offense in women's lacrosse, and helped change the game where they put in restraining lines. So things like that, if they're going to let you play with 12, my point was, why aren't we playing defense with 12 if we're allowed to? But back then the game was just played different, and people didn't really evaluate how to have the best success. So that was kind of my approach when Cindy Timshall hired me at the University of Maryland. Was I started from the skills, the way they taught the skills, to the way they coach offense and defense, and I started looking at it from a skill perspective, like what's the best way to shoot, pass, catch with the equipment that we have? Can we make the equipment better? Can we gain an advantage? And then the same thing on the offense and defense side of the field. And, through that run, it was fun to be a part of. We had 2 50-game winning streaks, won 7 straight national championships, and really changed the way the game was played. And I'm very proud of working with many of the Division I coaches now that were players for Cindy, and have gone on and done amazing things in the coaching world, and had huge success over the years. People like Kelly Amante and Kathy Reese, and there's a few of them that just have done an amazing job.
Yeah, Gary, I think we had Acacia on last week, and I think she might have said maybe she just had 1 year with you, and she was really
Well, I
bummed.
recruited her. And then I left women's lacrosse for a few years. So I took a little 5-year hiatus. So
So, for me, you know, you've been really inspiring because you've made such an impact on both the men's and the women's game. And, when I first got into, women's coaching in 2018, it was something that I was really excited about. I have 3 younger sisters, and, um, you know, I was just excited to see what I could try to bring what I've learned, to the women's game. And I think that's why Lindsay had hired me at the time. Something I noticed, and I'm curious your perspective on being someone that you have innovated so much. Sometimes, whether it was myself talking about women shooting 8-meter step downs or working more in the 2-man game, at the time, I met some people that were very opposed or said that's not going to work, or don't even waste your time, or the girls I was training at the time would get yelled at if they tried the shot. So for you personally, in your experience, for the rules or in general, how do you rise above people that tell you that you can't or that things don't work? Like, how do you approach that?
I don't really deal with those people, to be honest. Like I don't need to. I let my job and what I've done speak for itself. So for example, when we were changing the women's game at Maryland, 2 50-game winning streaks and 7 straight national championships kind of spoke for the changes in what we were teaching. So, I didn't really have a huge issue with it at the time because we just had so much success. So it was hard to argue. And that it really allowed, you know, the modern lacrosse player really, dove in and said, yeah, this is working. I want to be like Maryland here. And, Cindy's trained so many coaches over the years through all their camps and clinics and given them the foundation to be great coaches. And, she's done an amazing job for the game.
Yeah, so going off that and bringing it a little bit more to present day, I think, you've been incredibly innovative all throughout. You made a big transition back in the summer of 2021 from switching over from the women's program at Syracuse to the men's program at Syracuse. Obviously, one of the biggest coaching jobs in college lacrosse, if not the biggest. That was a huge jump. I remember I was at PLL training camp at the time when I found out that you were taking it over. And I think some of the talk at camp was, oh, well, he hasn't been coaching on the men's side. So, like, this is a huge job for someone that was just a woman's coach. But I think listening to you now, and I don't think you were ever, nervous about that or skeptical, but I wanted to just kind of dive into what that experience was like for you. Was this something that you kind of always dreamed of switching over? And how was that process? Was it smooth? Were there tough parts? Just that transition as a whole.
Well, so when I was at Maryland, back in the day, coaching with Cindy, um, I got talking with the athletic director there. A couple of men's teams reached out to me about coaching opportunities. There was a couple teams that thought outside the box and said, "Hey, Gary, would you be interested in applying for the men's job here? Head coaching, whatever." And I used that to go back to the athletic director at Maryland, Debbie Yao at the time, and ask her. I said, "You know what? I would actually like to be the men's coach here at Maryland." Said, I love being with the women, but, I would love to get a shot of if Coach Adele ever retires, would it be better for me to go and get some men's experience, and then apply when he does retire, or stay here? And on a couple of occasions, she clearly said, "You're better off to stay here. You'll be in good shape. Don't worry about it." So what I did instead is I got involved in coaching international lacrosse on the men's side. So I coached my first couple of U19 Canadian national teams on the men's side, and had that opportunity to be coaching men. And then from there, I, thought, okay, I'm getting a little experience. Dick Adele retires. I don't get the job. Um, Obviously a little upset. So I resigned my position with the women because I just didn't feel that the leadership and Debbie Yao was getting it done for me anymore. After I'd spent, numerous years committed to Maryland, thinking the opportunity was there. So it didn't happen. So I left and parted ways. And actually it was a great opportunity, and things always happen for a reason. And I took 5 years and I was able to coach my kids' teams and not be stuck in the day-to-day college life of coaching, you know, crazy hours, weekends, all of that. So it was a lot of fun. So I really did enjoy that time where I wasn't coaching college lacrosse. Now, in the meantime, I took on jobs coaching professional lacrosse in that gap. And I coached the Bayhawks for 4 years. And then I went on to coach the NLL, the Colorado Mammoth, for 2 years, along with the Canadian indoor national team and assistant coach on the field team. And so I did a bunch of men's lacrosse in between. And then Syracuse reached out and offered me and said, "Hey, we'd love you to come back to Syracuse and coach women's lacrosse." And at the time, I was the head coach of the Colorado Mammoth. We'd won one championship, um, and we had a pretty good thing going. But I thought it was an opportunity where I could, get back into the college game, coach my daughter, have that experience, and sure enough, that's what happened. I took the job at Syracuse, had 14 wonderful years. And on a side note, Maryland did call me when the job did open up again after Dave Cottle. And unfortunately, I told him I wasn't interested at the time, that I was committed to Syracuse, my alma mater, and that I was going to coach my daughter in college. So I did get the opportunity, kind of turn that down and put closure to that, and that was great. And so you can see by my history, I definitely had some interest in coaching men's lacrosse and wanted to do it at the collegiate level. But for 14 years, Coach Desko was my coach. I loved him. I never even thought about it. And then all of a sudden one day, after we went to the championship game and our athletic director, Mr. Wildhack, he stayed with the team, went to dinners with the team. And I got back and he said, we're going to make a change on the men's side. Coach Desko's retiring and would you be interested in taking over? And I immediately said, of course I would. I've always wanted to coach men's lacrosse at the collegiate level, and I can't think of a better place than my own alma mater and place I call home. To be honest, probably the hardest thing for me was going in all the coaching positions I've had before. I've always been the offensive coordinator and the head coach. So, to be brutally honest, that was the toughest change for me as a coach, because I didn't feel I was, getting enough done with the kids on the field because I wasn't coaching the offense. But I got over it when I thought back to my days at Maryland and the way Cindy Timshall coached as the head coach at Maryland and won 7 straight championships. She knew I was good at coaching the offense. She trusted my decisions, and she let me take ownership of it. And she was a strong enough coach in person to be able to do that. So I certainly realized I needed to do that too. And I've embraced Coach March, and I think he's done an amazing job at coaching our offense. And certainly we talk, away from the game and in practice, and we get on the same page, and we know what's going. So I know what's happening and all that, but I don't step in. I don't tell him what to do, because I have trust in him, and the same trust that Cindy Timshall had in me. So I've learned that valuable lesson, and to let my ego go, and it's about winning and success of the team. And I think we're on the verge of getting back to that point of being a championship caliber team.
I think the role of a college head coach is kind of spot on to what you're saying. You have that role of being in charge of the team as a whole, and then you have your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator. You're kind of in that head coach role, that GM role. When you look at you on the sidelines, I think you're not the type of guy that's going to be in the ref's face or screaming on the sidelines at your players. I never had the chance to play for you as a player. We missed each other by a year at Syracuse, but I think you do have a unique coaching style and just a unique presence on the field. Could you talk about a little bit how you've developed that coaching style? Is that through your upbringing? Is that something you learned from Coach Simmons, or was that at Maryland? Just where you've kind of gained that. I think you look at your players that you've coached from the women's side and the men's side in the last, call it 15 years. You see players with a lot of confidence, a lot of skill, but you're not someone that's screaming at them or harping on them to do different things. So where does that come from, and what's that like?
Well, I guess, it goes back to, I've had many coaches over the years, and I've been very fortunate to have a lot of success. And I, much like learning to play the game, learning to coach the game, you have to evaluate the way the way your coaches handled things and took care of business. And I took what I thought was the good and the bad, and kind of took ownership of it and made it my own. And the stuff I didn't like, I didn't do. And I developed into I'm not a rah-rah coach. I'm not giving huge speeches because I wasn't that type of player. I was a mentally driven on focus, energy. Um, you couldn't distract me from the floor when I was playing. You know, I was in the game 100%, and, couldn't hear things in the crowd, couldn't hear what people were yelling at me. If I was playing, I was all in, you know. My preparation, you know, thousands of hours of visualization, practice, preparation, and when I got on the floor, I was able to just play. But I would be lost in the game to the point where, you know, you could slash me or call me names, do whatever, it didn't bother me one bit because I just wanted to have the killer instinct, put the ball in the back of the net, go back to center, do it again, you know, play the game and demonstrate, I always felt, someone cheap shots you or hits you or does whatever, the way to make them truly pay was to put the ball in the back of the net, win the game, and then say and see who's hurting more after the game, right? And it's not the guy with the bruise, it's the guy that's sulking because they lost, So that was always my approach. So, you know, I've kept that in my coaching philosophy and my style is just to be very relaxed, focused, and you know, I'm not doing a lot of yelling. I'm not doing that because I'm really watching the game, looking for the little things that can help us have success. So, you don't see it a lot and I hope you know, with the group we got, it's about, bringing in the right coaches and I think, I heard Acacia talk about it. She was on your podcast about figuring out maybe what you're not good at and get somebody to take those areas. And well, for me, what I want an aligned staff. And I think that's not always easy to get where everybody's truly on the same page, similar philosophies. And I feel pretty good right now that Syracuse men's lacrosse, our staff is fully aligned. Um, there's 6, 7 of us that are all on the same page, trying to reach the same goal and doing whatever needs to be done to help the team have success. So, that's kind of my focus. And what I've realized as a coach, it's not just about you. It's about your staff. It's about the players. It's about providing an incredible experience for the athletes. Too many times I've heard stories over the years about coaches that torment kids and don't make the experience fun, but I've always had fun playing lacrosse. So I want to provide that fun experience for the next person because when you enjoy it, you work harder at it, you want to be better at it, and you're going to put in the time. So why not make it fun to go out and practice and why not make it fun to stay after, come out before and you know, that's what I'm trying to provide for all of these athletes that come in on the lacrosse side, obviously, as well as help them get a great education and build a future in whatever they want to do.
Gary, I think it's really cool to hear you talk about that philosophy. And, if I'm kind of picking up on it too, and even what you said when you were younger, you're more of a actions speak louder than words kind of a guy, now.
Absolutely.
Now, I think as a player, I was talking to some guys back from the Mount Washington Tavern, teams and Team Toyota, and they talked about, you always produced, you were always the most marked guy. And interestingly enough, too, like well, one guy remembers like you never getting hurt. You took such a beating. You're at every practice, you're at every game. And I think like being a great player, like you can show everyone that, because that's currently what everyone's seeing day in, day out. But now all these years later, as a coach, I'm always fascinated too. You can't go out there like you used to and just show people how it's done because your playing days are behind you. So then how do you build and cultivate some of that competitive desire and inspire this next generation to be like you were, because there's no doubt that, how you played on the field, but also your reputation about how you played is truly incredible. So, how do you get this next group of players at Cuse to see that and be inspired to do that?
Well, I can tell you, it's definitely tougher on the men's side, bringing in some of these aspects. And I think, it's funny you bring this up now because it's exactly what I'm focused on for the preseason this year is I'll be honest, on the women's side, I was able to bring in some meditation, visualization, affirmation type training and get buy-in. And on the men's side, I'll be honest, I tried to do it my first year and I did not have much success. It was too different. It was too much work. Whatever it was, the team wasn't in. And, I think our record demonstrated that at 4-10. I think I was just too different at the time than the old coaching staff. They kind of let you play and they didn't bother you other than practice time and game time, right, Steven? That was your time. A time outside of practice and games was your own. And, for me, that's the time you're doing your mental prep, your mindfulness, all that good stuff. That's now that free time is some of the lacrosse time as well. So I think I'm really working on developing right now a plan for this year and how we prepare for practices and games. And I'm hoping and I believe that I have a group of guys that'll buy in because they want to win and be successful. So yet to come, but hopefully you'll see and you'll be able to talk to some of these kids down the road about how it's going.
I do have a quick follow-up on that. You mentioned the women's buy-in, versus the men's, and you could attribute some of that to, the past staff versus now. You've got obviously those differences and new recruits coming in. But and I get this question all the time, like, what's the difference between coaching men's and women's, and would love to hear your perspective on it. And Taylor played at a high level, and so what do you think? Like, what have you noticed over the years, training and coaching?
Well, in general, on the women's side, they're more apt to do team building type and mental preparation type stuff. They're game for that more, and they want to help each other more. So they want to support each other, do those types of things. And that's kind of where the biggest difference for me between men and women is trying to get the compete level really high on a daily basis. And I think the coaches that really have success on the women's side, Kelly Amante, for example, nobody gets more out of her players than she does. They compete for every ground ball, every time they run back to the line. I remember when she was a player at Maryland and she drove everybody else crazy, but I loved it. Every single drill, she sprinted back to line every time. And the other teammates obviously at times were like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. Now I got to do it. So she raised the level of her teammates by putting in an extraordinary effort every day. And I think, for women, if you can develop that high compete level, you're going to have some good success, along with what you did, which was develop their skills. But nowadays, you know what? These kids have pretty good stills. The sticks are way better. They can do a lot more with it. So that part's come a long way. But it's really the coaches that can get them to really compete at 110% all the time, then I think they have success. And on the men's side, it's more about getting them to work together, you know, developing the chemistry that you're willing to accept in a role for the betterment of the team. And there's a lot of players that kind of just care about themselves and how they look and how they do. And that's more of the battle on the men's side, is getting players to buy into team lacrosse, what it takes to win championships. It's not all about you, it's about the team. And I think if you can do that, those are the teams that have success. Like, sports psychology, it's not hard. All these, sports psychologists, they just study all the championship teams and how they are, so it's, having played and been on a lot of championship teams, I felt I have the experience on how to do that and develop that chemistry. And I've always, you know, prided myself in the ability to create chemistry amongst men and get them to buy into their roles. And, I think that showed on the professional and international level that I coached on the men's side, having won championships in all those levels. And it's not easy, but you got to do it. Just like you got to be diligent. It's not easy to get young ladies to give you 110% effort every single day. It's easier for the guys. They get out. They just want to compete and bang. It's just in their nature.
It is interesting that you say that too, because as Steve and I have continued to try to evolve our trainings on the offensive side, and I know Matt Dunn on the defensive side, you can get a lot more buy-in when you don't have to tell them to play hard versus creating drills that put them against other people, and then you kind of see which kids don't like losing in the drill, and which kids want to get the advantage, and to everything you mentioned earlier in the podcast. And then as a coach, I feel like you can take a step back and really observe what's going on versus trying to be, you know, operate the drill and, just yelling at them to play harder, run harder. Like it's never going to work, So it's just interesting to hear that, because I agree on the compete. How do you inspire them to run hard every play and not take plays off?
Well, yeah, I call it the killer instinct as well. Like Alyssa Cometti played for me here at Syracuse, and there was nobody that had a higher compete level, and she helped this program become a national powerhouse. And she'd score 1,000 goals in practice. Like there was at no time did she ever take an opportunity off just to rest or relax. Like it was a game, and that's the way I played. That's the way I practiced. I wanted to beat you in practice or game, whatever, it didn't matter. I just wanted to compete and demonstrate that I could put the ball in the net. I wanted to practice doing it in different ways and, you know, have a killer instinct and, tried to bring that to the women's side and obviously as to the men as well. And it's also interesting on trying to teach kids and how to get them to learn new things as well is always unique. And I have my philosophy on that where, you got to do your work on your own and then you got to practice in practice and then you can try it in a game type thing. That's always been my kind of philosophy. But nowadays I see kids that don't, for example, behind the backs, they don't practice them. They actually just do them in practice when it randomly once in a while. And then you get in a game and they just do them randomly once in a while. And the rate of success is far lower for them because they haven't mastered it by practicing it intentionally in practice, or on their own. I use visualization and training personally to develop every move that I ever came up with or made by seeing it in my mind, seeing it in a game situation, going out on the field, practicing it as if it was a game situation, and then getting into practice and actually repping it, and learning how to do it in live. And then that would set me up to, back in the glory days, you watch Syracuse lacrosse, our rate of success on behind the back and trick shots at Syracuse, you know, were astronomical because we practiced it so much. And Coach Simmons always used to say, "Yeah, you think the game was fun? You should have seen what they were doing at practice." Well, we were practicing it at practice, so we were really good at it. So it was more fun at practice because you saw a lot more of it. But it set you up for that one shot in a game. And but there was a whole lot of work put into that to get there. And so that's kind of my philosophy on learning new things is got to work at it, practice it, and then you can master it. And that's what the great players do. They don't throw it behind the back and hope it goes in. They know it's going to go in because they've done it before. They know when, where, the position, all of that sort of thing. Kind of like Joey that is a little when he comes up lefty and he turns and shoots a righty behind the back. That he's practiced, and he knows that he has success with it because he's worked on it outside of practice, in practice, and then it works in a game because he knows it's going to work.
I want to talk about your philosophy around freshmen because I've seen both on the women's side, there have been a ton of star players that have just hit the ground running. So have you always been kind of in support of that as a head coach?
So yeah, because unfortunately, my brother and I came into Syracuse in January, so we were mid-year enrollees. And we showed up to a team that had been to a Final Four and had success, and we played so differently that I don't think they knew what to do with us. And so as a freshman, my entire freshman year, I played third line midi with my brother. And, even the coaching staff wasn't aligned on Paul and I. I think Coach Desko thought one way, Coach Simmons wanted us out on the field all the time. So, Coach Simmons would throw me in any position, go play attack, go play the wing, go play the clearing midi. And so I did that and actually, became a third line midi that became an honorable mention All-American as a freshman. So shockingly, I don't know how that happens, how a third line midi can do that, but it happened. And, I think it was all the extra opportunities that I got kind of bumped me up, and I end up, I don't know, having a bunch of goals and points more than a lot of the first and second line middies. So it's probably why it happened, but it changed the way Syracuse thought about freshmen because after that year, Coach Simmons promised that if you're good enough as a freshman, you would play right away. And I think Pat McCabe was the first example of a Syracuse freshman that came in and was allowed to really dominate right away. And Pat McCabe, a tremendous four-time All-American at Syracuse. And he, so I put that in the back of my mind. And I always said, my philosophy is you got to create an environment where freshmen can feel comfortable. They don't feel like, they don't belong. They're not an equal teammate. And I've always created that culture within my teams that, freshmen don't collect all the balls. Freshmen don't move the goals. The team does everything. And you're just a new player on the team. You're not any special category other than teammate. And I challenge everybody to be a great teammate. And everybody moves the goals. Everybody does the work. Everybody helps everybody. Everybody serves the team. So I've always felt that's important. And that allows freshmen to build some confidence. I know that I would have been a completely different player if I had had that experience at Syracuse as a freshman, where, you know, I wasn't just a freshman that, you know, they took a chance and they provided and said, you're just a player on the team, go do what you do. It would have, I think, elevated, if we'd had that opportunity to not be held back because we were freshmen. And I think that's really what happened.
Yeah, I love that point, and I think, so much of it too is, can be whether it's from your peers or your coaches, the language used in response to making mistakes, in response to taking certain shots. And you can be building someone up constructively, or you can be tearing them down. And I think, you know, you kind of struck me a little bit when you were talking about, your guys' playing days. And then I feel like there's almost been this window of, skill development and things being very restrictive. Like even me growing up in Baltimore, behind the back was considered flashy. I wish someone told me, hey, you can use this functionally to get the job done, and not just get yelled at if you did it. And so I feel like, to your point about the freshmen, you can give them such a boost and they can end up being players that really help your team on a final four run, considering it's a quarter of your roster.
Yep, it is. So I agree. Provide an opportunity for them, and people rise to the challenge they're provided, and the ones that do it real well, are those amazing ones that get it and learn to compete and accept their role, but they're willing to do more and they practice and work hard. So when they do take chances, they usually have success.
Yeah, so to kind of close the loop, we've obviously discussed, incredibly successful career as a player, incredibly successful career as a coach. Now branching over to the men's side, where you guys are seeing continued success each and every year. You have a really promising year ahead this year. I just wanted to ask, what does Syracuse and Syracuse lacrosse mean to you? What do the coaches before you mean? It's obviously one of the most storied, if not the most storied, men's college lacrosse program. You've had the chance to play for it as a player, be around it as an alum, and now be the leader of it. So what does it mean to you?
Well, it's family, it's tradition, um, really, and that's what I'm trying to encourage our alums, that we are a family. We are, we do have that storied tradition, and that you can make a difference in continuing that legacy by supporting the team and the program. And I always say, what did you get out of playing at Syracuse all day? It was everything for me. I learned how to be successful in everything I did by being a part of that team and what Coach Simmons, Coach Desco taught me. And that's part of the tradition and the legacy of the previous coaching staffs, is they were able to create that tremendous success. 22 straight Final Four is crazy, 11 national championships, and you know, I'm just here to, my job's just to try and get number 12. So that's what I'm working on, is doing, learning from the past staffs, how they had success, evaluating the current environment, making adjustments, taking lessons from all the coaches I've ever had, and putting together a program, I believe, and teaching these young men how to win and how to be successful. So that's what I'm trying to do. And, you know, I got a great staff aligned together that is on the same page, and we're moving in the right direction. And, you know, the difference between winning and losing, there's a lot that goes into it. Sometimes it's a bounce, sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's a call. Best you can do is prepare yourself for those opportunities, and hope that you can execute at the highest level and come out on top. And you're going to get opportunities to win or lose. And the more comfortable you are about winning, the higher rate and higher chance you are of having success and winning those championships. So that's what I'm trying to prepare these guys that, you know, we haven't been in a Final Four in a while. We haven't won a championship for a long time. I want to help you prepare yourself so that you're ready to make great decisions under the pressure of a national championship run.
Gary, I'm excited to watch you guys continue to grow and the team continue to develop. You've shared so much advice already, just naturally through our conversation. But you know, even you talking about speaking with past staffs and trying to keep learning to then help prep this team. It just makes me wonder, what advice would you give for young coaches? And like, where do you draw inspiration as a coach, for those of us out there that are continuing to try to get better at our, coaching crafts?
Well, you look at everything. I've certainly had mentors and friends out there that I respect incredibly and learn from and talk to, and became friends with John Harbaugh. Had a nice win over his brother yesterday, and see that the Ravens there do a great job, and you know, you just kind of look at things uh, analytically and give yourself a chance. See how other sports, other coaches, what they talk about, how they what's their process. All of those things can help you learn, and then you just gotta figure out what you want to be like. There's certainly different coaching styles. You can be a player's coach, but still have discipline and focus and energy and excitement. So, you got to find out how to learn to do that the right way rather than just being buddies with the players and letting them kind of do what they want and not be focused. You're probably not going to have a lot of success. And you see that happens on teams all the time. And a lot of times on the professional level where they say, oh, he was a great guy, but nobody did their job. No one executed their role. So there is a fine line between it all, and you got to figure out what you want to be like. And you know, um, for parents out there that don't love coaches, the hard part is not everybody can play. And I always try and value every kid from top to the bottom equally, and they all have an important job on the team. And I've always told my kids that you may not be starting, you might be playing, but if you don't practice 100%, give your best, your team's not going to be nearly as good. So that's your responsibility for being a part of the team, is that you show up every day and give 100%. So, it's important to really know what you want to be as a coach and how you want to do it.
Well, Coach Gate, we really appreciate the time that you've taken today. Hopefully, our listeners are going to pick up a lot. Really appreciate everything that you've done, and really looking forward to watching Syracuse continue to grow. Feel like you guys are on a great trajectory. Obviously, personally, really hopeful for the upcoming season. And thanks again for your time.
I appreciate it, guys. You guys done a great job. I love the way you guys coach. Much like when I was teaching myself as a kid, you analyze why and how and what gives you success and the little details that matter. And I appreciate that. I know, Deemer, I told you that before, that you do an amazing job breaking down the game, and I've certainly noticed and love following you and your advice to all these young players. So keep it up.